your view? Well, I think that in the Riot Control Commission report, they have put their finger on something that either we have closed our eyes to or we have recognized, and that is the fact that, yes, throughout the United States, there is a definite element of racism. And unfortunately, I think up to now, many of us and many of those in government have talked about the effect of racism rather than the cause of racism. Now, what is the effect of racism? The effect of racism is a decreased ability to obtain a good job, the decreased ability to obtain good housing, and the decreased ability to obtain good schooling. This is the cause, or this is the effect of racism. And I think now that we've got to act in those areas, and this is what the Commission recommends, that there be immediate, massive reaction to these effects of racism so that we can provide better housing, better schooling, and better employment for those people who live in the ghettos. And I don't think there's any question about this, and this we must have recognized before now. Maybe it's hitting us, so they say, right between the eyes now, we've got to get moving. Now, the impetus must come in this respect from Washington, because if we're talking about massive spending, we've got to be talking about the federal implementation and the federal funding of many new programs. But let's get back to the cause now, not the effect. The cause is racism. And you just can't shut your eyes to the fact that it exists. And this Commission report, although it talked about racism, talked about dealing with the effects of racism, it never dealt with how we can eliminate the cause of all these things, which is racism. And very frankly, I just don't know. I think this is a personal thing. I think this is something that we can only develop through better education of the whites, vast majority in this country, and taking it along normal lines of development. If the effects can be eliminated because of the better schooling, if we can give them better schooling, we must give them better schooling and better jobs. I don't think we can afford to sit back and wait for federal action. It must come. But I think within the individual states and the individual cities, there's got to be an immediate priority given to the development of immediate programs to get into the slum areas, to get into the ghetto areas this summer, and do something about helping the people on the streets to get them employment, to get them something to do. And frankly, I know there is considerable thought being given to that right at this very moment.
Hey? Yeah, wait a minute now. I gotta write this. Another person vitally interested in the question, what about South Providence, is Clifford Montiero, the Community Contact Officer for the Rhode Island State Council of Churches. Cliff, Eugene Burgess, for instance, says that one of the most important things to remedy the problems that exist in South Providence today is low-cost housing, better housing. Do you agree with this? Is this the most or one of the most important problems that has to be solved?
I think housing is important, but I think one of the most important things is getting a person a decent job. If a person has a decent job, then he can provide himself with an adequate housing. But if a person doesn't have a decent job, we provide him low-cost housing, then we have to provide him rent subsidy, etc. And I would say that the job comes first as far as housing.
Well, what's being done, to your knowledge, right now to provide jobs for people? Or better yet, what's being done to provide people for jobs?
Well, the state of Rhode Island had a job fair, which I think was a good effort. There are manpower training programs, the OIC program, the Opportunities Industrialization Center. There's a concentrated employment program under the Model Cities. Spidell's Corporation is putting on a training program. So there are several training programs. Industry has indicated that it will take the trainees and it's going to reevaluate its entry-level positions. So I'm quite optimistic about the job situation in the future. But as far as immediate jobs, this is something different.
Not enough is being done immediately. In other words, what you're saying, we can't wait for model cities and these other programs. The effort is being focused on a long-range point of view, and we need something that's going to plug the hole in the dike now.
Not so much a real long-range program, but I think that there are hundreds of high school students right now that are out of jobs for the summer. I think that there are people who are involved in training programs who have to make certain sacrifices in order to compete in these training programs because the salary or the subsidy isn't too great in order for them to live adequately. So I think there has to be something more done along those lines immediately speaking.
Now, if you had your way, this is perhaps a tough question, it's one of these iffy questions. If you had your way, what three things would you do or have done right now to help, let's say, the not just South Providence, but the entire parts of Providence that are suffering from underemployment, inadequate housing?
I would say that the first thing that I would do is to have a reevaluation of our history courses. I think it's very important that the black community realize its contributions to America and the white community realize the contributions of black people so that we develop an inner pride and a respect. I think this is very important, for one. The second thing would be to have job opportunities, concentrated programs with industry saying that we realize that this person does have working habits, bad working habits, but we're going to take him on while he's doing this training program at a decent salary. The other thing would be to provide adequate and decent housing immediately. I would say identification, the job situation, the housing, then you could bring about a concern for education, because sociologists have said that one's environment has a great deal of bearing on one's educational attitude towards education.
In regard to African... Now, in regard to African history, OIC, for instance, has begun a training program, an educational training program, one portion of which is a course, abbreviated though it may be, in African history. It's being taught by an exchange student who's attending Rhode Island College. He comes from Ghana. Are you familiar with this, and is this... Now, when you speak about education, in particular African history, such a thing is going on at OIC, an educational training program. Is this the type of thing that you're talking about?
Yes, but I think it has to be much wider in scope. The man in the street type of person. A person who has a decent job, a person who may be a lawyer, who may be a teacher, who may be a doctor, who may be just John Q. Public, who's in one of the building trades union, has to be informed of the contributions that the black man has made in America.
You want him to have courses in African history? Is this what you're saying, or
Not
black
so much
history?
Just courses. I think it could be done through mass media. I think it could be done in our newspaper coverage. It could be done through our religious institutions. It could be done through our social clubs. I think that we've all said that there have been omissions in our history that do not give the proper coverage to the black community. And yet there has not been a great deal done to overcome this difficulty.
Would you say the communication lines are down? Were they ever up?
That's the point. I doubt if they were really ever up. For so many people not to know that black people have made the hundreds of inventions that they've made in America, and that we have a tremendous communication system, it shows that there's never been a constructive way of projecting this type of information.
Overall, as far as Providence now is concerned, would you say that in this regard progress is being made? Or...
I would say that we're very fortunate in Providence to have, first of all, a small geographical area. We're dealing with a state of 800,000 people. We're dealing with so many minorities who they themselves have had a problem, and once we convince those minorities of the problems of the black community, I think that we're on our way. Many people have said it in reverse, that second and third generations are the most difficult people to communicate with. Well, I look to it with optimism, and I think that Rhode Island, with its small population, its tremendous wealth, and its strong leadership that it has, will be able to overcome its problems relatively quickly.
For the past 2 summers, we've had some trouble in South Providence. It's been tagged by the authorities as primarily juvenile delinquency, vandalism. Do you agree with this? Is it a gang of kids making noise and throwing rocks, or are these some warning signs down there that we've perhaps got something to worry about in the way of what Watts has had to worry about, Detroit?
Well, I would say that it's partly juveniles. I would say it's partly frustration. You must look behind that as to why juveniles feel this way. Why juveniles feel a sense of desperation and frustration. Many times it may come from the home situation. And why would that home situation feel this way? I wouldn't want to be a prophet, but we have had similar disturbances in the South Providence area for the last 9 years. About 9 years ago, there were about several people arrested for it. I think you'd have to look back at the history of August 1st. August 1st has been historically celebrated in Rhode Island by the black community as Emancipation Proclamation Day. That was a day we put on our Sunday go-to-meeting clothes and go to the amusement park. I think it's changed a little bit.
What about this summer, Cliff? What do you, in your opinion, you're in touch down there, what do you think we've got to look forward to? Is it going to be a long, hot summer, to use the cliche for Providence, or are things in good enough shape so that we don't have to worry?
I hope it will be a long, hot summer in the sense of constructive, positive, direct action. We still have many of the problems that we had last year. We have the problems with bad housing, lack of educational opportunities, etc. You know, they may have diminished somewhat. I hope that we'll have direct action. I hope that we'll have people participating in voter registration to bring about positive social change. I hope that we won't have to worry about destructive acts. But if we're to look at the last few weeks, we've seen all over the city, all over the country, a sense of frustration and desperation, not just by black people, but by many white people. I would hope that we would have a positive summer that would spread year-round with positive acts, not so much violence. I personally believe in nonviolence as a tactic and cannot support violent acts.
Cliff, you're in touch very much so with South Providence. What do we have to look forward to there now? Is it going to be a long, hot summer, or are we going to have a repetition of the violence which existed there in the past 2 summers? Cliff, are there any instances now of cooperation between black and white groups working together?
Yes, I would say the best example is People Against Poverty, which is a group Bill McNamara and myself are co-chairman. Through its leadership, we established that black and white can work together on certain issues. Of course, there are some problems that the white community has to solve. There's other problems the black community has to solve. But I think that we have to have organizations like PAP and some of the State Council of Churches departments and some of the departments through the Catholic Diocese, Human Relations Commission, the State Commission Against Discrimination. There are many organizations that are working now in the state where black and white is no real problem, where people have come together because of their common interests, their concern, their dedication, their commitment to eliminating a social problem. And I would say at this time that I hope that people of goodwill throughout the state who have showed concern, who have talked about the problems, this is their time to act. Many good people have discussed the problems and issues that face our society. But unless we get people who are willing to work positively to solve these problems, then we have discussion without action. And that causes complete frustration and desperation for those who suffer.
So what you're saying then are the people that ask the question, what can I do? The thing that they can do right at the moment is to join one of these groups.
If they don't find a group that suits their own taste, then stop their own group. But get together, come together so that they can exchange ideas and strategy to bring about social change. One of the existing groups that are functioning now at least could give them some experience or advice working along with them, such as the group in Barrington. There's a group that formed in Barrington, Rhode Island, and this group has called upon people in Providence to assist them. And I think that we have to get groups like this across the state. And Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and the other states. I keep